Hello, everyone, and welcome back to ManifestED. We are here today with a topic that's gotten a lot of energy and a lot of interest. Today's episode, we will be talking all about India and what makes this market so special. We know India is a major exporter of education companies, but also an importer of US degrees. So on the heels of many conversations with our esteemed colleagues, we wanted to bring in two of our foremost specialists on the subject. Today, I am joined by Nikhil Kumbhar, our programmatic media lead, and also Alan Wayne, our international growth consultant. So if India has been a market that has piqued your interest, this is the episode for you. Now, why don't you both tell me a little bit about yourselves? I'd love to hear how you got involved in the international space.
Alex, great to be here today. As you mentioned, I'm Alan Wayne, grown into the international space the last few years, but it's always been a fascination for me. The travel bug really bit me at an early age. I've made it to 45 countries around the world, seen so much of this amazing place we call Earth, and been even more fortunate to parlay that into a really interesting career with international as the focus. So my background at Google is in global product strategy. I've worked with clients of all shapes, sizes, and geographies to ensure our products met and exceeded their expectations. That experience really helped me better understand both the unique characteristics of consumers from market to market, but also what really ties us all together and provide something that's scalable and workable globally. I want to then take that lens into a more deeply consultative position on specific business challenges with individual clients, which I now have on Google's international growth team. In this space, I work specifically with our largest education partners with their global strategies across marketing, product, and operations.
Hey, Alex, and hello, everyone. I'm Nikhil. I'm the programmatic media lead here at Google for education vertical. And as Alex said, I do have background in India, as I've worked in education vertical back in India as well. Moved to US back in 2019, and now currently working with education-based companies here in US. So as a part of my job, I work with these EdTech companies or universities who aspire to cross the borders and serve students in those markets, because there may not be demand for these brands based in US. So my job is to strategize, work closely with marketing teams to really understand the dynamics of these international markets and help them with go-to-market strategies to create the demand, especially using programmatic media channels.
Perfect. Well, hopefully, folks, you're all excited to hear from Alan and Nikhil as much as I am. I'm going to kick us off with, I think, what's like an easy question, but important. I would love to hear from you both. What would you say is driving the education conversation across borders?
Yeah, so I think this is truly just such a fascinating global education moment we're living through. International education is already a $200 billion market with over 5 million enrollments just in this year. And then the third party we like to work with a lot, HolonIQ, projects that over $400 billion will be the market size and over 8 million enrollments by 2030. So not too far away, doubling the size of that market. So massive opportunity already and truly transforming as we go into the next decade. And many of these changes we're now seeing, of course, were accelerated by the pandemic, but many were also already in motion much before then. And it's been kind of a slow burn, really accelerated by the pandemic into what we're now seeing now, transforming all different parts of the industry. So we're seeing things like digitization from traditional educators, those that either made the early steps before the pandemic or really had their hand forced with students needing to learn from home. We're seeing universities transform their models through innovating teaching models that are resonating well with learners, looking for cheaper, shorter, more flexible, but also still worthwhile program types like short courses, boot camps, and certificates. And there's also been a tremendous movement in the EdTech side and professional skilling with many local players now involved, especially in a market like India. All of this provides a truly tremendous opportunity for educators of all shapes, sizes, types to think about borderless opportunities to recruiting educators or learners wherever they are to help educate them, given that so much education now and into the future will happen online.
Yeah, totally agree with Alan. I mean, with pandemic, a lot of things changed and people started going on internet for access to information. But if you look at education specifically, especially in emerging markets, education has played a big role, massive role in terms of uplifting societies, taking societies from lower middle class to upper middle class and whatnot. And internet definitely played a big role in that access to information part. It became the biggest socio-economic lever. So the people in Africa also have access to the same content that people in US have. People in India can also access the same degrees that US students can get access to. So I think with the access of internet, the market is out there, and there are students looking for the content, the educators, like Alan said, the courses, the teachers who can help them get out of whatever class that they are in those specific market. And US companies understand that. The EdTech companies based in US, they definitely understand that. And some of them are trying to enter in these markets, maybe to become early mover or just get some pie of that local market and offer them the quality of education that they're giving to people in US. So I think market is out there, and that's what probably driving a lot of US companies to some of these emerging markets.
I guess I want to ask almost a two-part question. The first one, Alan, might go to you, and partly riffing on what you were saying, that there's such a massive transformation to come over the next decade. This population is likely to double. I guess I'd love to hear what makes India such a unique market. And then Nikhil, from you, when we talk about education being an industry that can change lives, how does that make India stand out within the education industry? So that was two. I can repeat, but Alan, why don't you go first?
Cool, thanks, Alex. Yeah, I mean, that transformation will only be especially focused in India because that country as a whole is going through such a major transformation. Even so, it's not a market necessarily to wait on, given that the size is so big right now as is, compared to a lot of other markets that maybe, US-based educators have been thinking about. So as a market, there's over 1.4 billion people living in India, which is 4 times the US market, and has 6 cities with metros, over 10 million. So these are states or, areas as big as some, key European or Asian markets that people might be thinking about. With that, it's a maturing, developing market. So the GDP growth is growing around twice the global average this last year, with the overall GDP being roughly the size of the UK and then growing, quite a bit faster than the global clip. And the people themselves are coming online dramatically. So internet penetration has really skyrocketed the last 5 years. There's now over 1 billion users, with half of those coming on in just the last 5 years. And that trend's not slowing down anytime soon. 3/4 of digital media is consumed via mobile. So smartphones, access, flexibility to be able to take and learn on phone, not just desktops, is going to be key in this market. And then for US-based educators, there's a strong and growing amount of affluence within the market, being able to afford US-based programs, more expensive programs, things. So pricing, having the right payment types are still going to be incredibly key in the short term. But those 14 locations are expected to grow to 48 by 2025. So purchasing power and the ability to afford programs and make it so that, cost of marketing is typically cheaper, but the return may not be there historically. That calculus is starting to change as we go into the next handful of years. One other thing that makes it particularly attractive for English first or US-based advertisers is the strong English proficiency, especially with the upwardly mobile, skills-seeking, education-wanting population looking for education online. So having a set of courses or a course in English, a ton of localization may not be needed to have initial success within that market, which is attractive for a lot of US-based educators.
I think the sheer size, especially relative to some of the markets I know a lot of schools and education providers are much more familiar with, makes this clearly very interesting. And Nikhil, I think you can probably speak to the education side of why India stands out as well.
Yeah, and like I said in my earlier point, that people are trying to get out of a specific class that they are in, and suddenly with access to internet, they found that chance to get access to that information. So yeah, there are 1.4 billion people, but half of them are on the internet. 750 million internet users. Right, India took #1 spot in education-related app downloads globally last year. My point is, Indian parents and Indian students are willing to spend or willing to consume a lot of education. Of course, their priorities are cricket, Bollywood, but the third most important category for them is education. After all of that, education really stands out. And at the same time, you also have to understand the private tuitions market in India, which is really unique to India compared to a lot of Western markets or international markets. I think the private tuitions market right now is around $100 billion. And there are a couple of reasons for that. Even the brightest students in the class, they will probably go for the private tuitions because there are like 60 plus students in class. So they definitely want to spend on private tuitions. There is a lot of exam anxiety. There is a lot of peer pressure. In a class of 60 students, 40 of them are average. And for their parents, spending money on education is important. And that's why they enroll their kids for private tuitions, or they don't mind spending extra for education. And again, I think signing up for tuition to score high grades is also seen as the sign of high intellect or matter of pride in some cases. So net, I think Indian parents are willing to spend more than 20-25% of their monthly expenditure on education itself. That means for all these EdTech players that may want to get into the market, their first job is to actually replace private tuitions. Replace or complement private tuitions, which is already $100+ billion market. And I think the parents and the students and their dynamics actually making that as a unique market. I have never really seen such a strong push from parents to push their kids to become a class topper the way it is in India and any other market. And that really makes it really, really unique.
Yeah, I would love to hear more about the EdTech companies coming out of India. But before we get to EdTech, maybe I can hold you here for another minute. I know, here in the US, we do have a private tuition dynamic, but it doesn't sound like it's quite the same as it is in India. So I'd love if you could tell us a little bit more about the prospective student and how any online education player should think about serving these students that we're finding in India.
Yeah, that's a very good question because, okay, let's talk about, prospective students. What exactly private tuitions are trying to solve, or what probably EdTech companies can try to solve. One is basically students don't know how to crack the test. I mean, there are only few students, class toppers know, but most of the students don't know how to crack a particular test. Second, I think they know math equations, but they probably don't know how they work. In India, we have a concept called ratta, which loosely translates into mugging up things, mugging up concepts. So they are becoming class toppers, but they probably not understand the concepts. And the third problem I would say is, the ease of understanding through English or technical language. I mean, one doesn't really have to explain just the equation, but really dumb it down to a level that anyone can understand that equation, make it visual. I can tell you one of my personal examples. When I started visiting some of the museums in US or the libraries, public libraries, the way I saw some of the visuals, the mathematical concepts that I learned in my class, like class 6, became clear to me now. So I think that's what private tuitions are trying to solve by having that dedicated attention. But that's what prospective students are looking for. Help me crack the test, help me understand the concepts, or just explain to me in my language. And that's what I think some of these EdTech companies are now doing. Of course, we know Byju's, which is one of the largest EdTech player right now, but there are, of course, players like Vedantu, an academy, Doubtnut, Upgrad, who cater to not just K-12, but upskilling, test prep. And they have all raised successful rounds in the last 2 years. The VC funding is just flowing in, primarily because I think they all understand the market size, not in just a number of users, but the amount of money that Indian parents are spending, which is north of $100 billion.
I think, especially I know you just mentioned Baiju, but I would love to hear more about what EdTech darlings or what shining examples are coming out of India that folks might not necessarily be aware of.
Very good question, again. Now, coming back to my of, dumbing it down, what does that? So generally, there are great teachers who can actually explain the concepts to really everyone. They can make anyone understand the concepts. And what we have seen, probably in my experience in India, we definitely have good teachers, but they can explain those concepts to really sharp, bright students. So some of these EdTech companies, they've started adopting a technique, I would say, of hiring actors who can literally explain some of these concepts in a way that kids can understand by having those visual expressions, facial expressions, using gestures that generally teachers lack because they are primarily into, explaining concepts step by step. And that particular pattern is really exciting because suddenly a lot of kids are finding those teachers more enticing, appealing. Again, they are presented as teachers, but behind the scenes, they may be actors who are explaining those concepts in a way kids can understand. So, be it a grad or be it, Vedantu, Tautner, a lot of those players, I think they're really getting into a knack of how to explain those concepts in a more visual way, and that's how they're doing it.
That is truly fascinating, and it makes so much sense. I think, the first time I saw Hamilton, history came to life on stage, and textbooks never really explained any of the world in the way that the play did. So I love that is being created as now a business and a method for teaching and bringing just rote memorization and conceptual steps to life and creating new meaning for future students. That is super exciting.
One quick thing I'd love to add was one of my clients actually said that, YouTube has a ton of content. Rather, Salman Khan on YouTube, who is known for his educational content, is world famous, gets the funding from Bill Gates and whatnot. But if you really follow his content, it's not for the average student. So even though the access of content is free of cost, that content is not meant for everyone. And I'm trying to go after every student who doesn't necessarily follow Salman Khan, but really hungry for the content. So I think that's what companies in emerging markets are doing, and probably some of the US-based companies can learn while entering into those markets.
I love that. And on that note, I think, if we're talking about how we can make educational content for everyone, and a lot of these ed tech companies are doing that, almost translating, if you will, concepts to make sure that the content is not only accessible but understood by all prospective students. Alan, I'll flip it to you. It's clear to me that there's a massive opportunity in India. And if I were an online education player and I wanted to take a step towards reaching these students, how would you recommend that I get started or companies get started in making sure that they reach out to this opportunity?
Absolutely. So I think the first step we always say is connect with your product operations legal team to make sure you're set up to accept students from international markets in India, or accept consumers, that your payment methods and things like that are on shape so you can actually run through the commerce to make the transaction actually happen. But second, in terms of localizing and fine-tuning the experience so that you'll actually be successful once you have your foundation set up, we have a really great external tool called Market Finder. It's a feature that Google launched in the last couple of years. So if you go to Market Finder through Google search, you can find guides on things like localization for the India market, international payment preferences, so we need to accept bank transfers or credit cards, debit cards, whatever the preferences might be for that market, international customer support and experience preferences, and then additional tools on things like market prioritization, in which other markets, even beyond India, might make sense. So this is something you can access on your own. You can visit today, and it can really help you fine-tune your business performance across international markets from both the product and operations lens, as well as the media and marketing lens. Finally, if you have access to a Google account team, feel free to reach out to them, and where international is an opportunity, they're happy to engage with you as well.
Thank you. I think what's clear to me, again, is just the magnitude of the opportunity and how much that's changing over the last decade. I think we talk a lot about how the world changed so much, and education and online education slid forward a decade. If that's the case, I think we're talking even now further out on this impact that we're making both in India and the impact that India can make on the rest of the world through their ed tech exports. I think what I'm hearing as a major theme is just this effort of localization, whether that be through ed tech companies and making education content not only accessible but understood, and making sure that the message resonates with prospective students. But then if you're looking to enter this market, that localization of course, your mobile efforts, your pricing, your payment, and then we talk a lot about marketing. So of course, your marketing using some of the tools that Alan mentioned. To me, I think this is only the tip of the iceberg. I'll likely be inviting both of our friends here back onto the channel to touch on some of these subjects in the months to come, but wanted to thank you all for tuning in. It's always great to have you on the channel. Please feel free to like and subscribe. We'll be sure to be putting out far more content in the months to come, but it's great to have you all.
Thanks, Alex. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, Alex.
Thanks both.